Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first quarterly Blink webinar. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tony Harris, and I'm one of the directors of BlinkMobile, and I'm also head of global sales and partners worldwide. I'd like to thank Mitch Bocking for his insightful presentation on Hornsby Shire Council and what they're doing with BlinkMobile. At the end of this, we're going to have a Q&A session. Now, we're not sure whether we should have the Q&A session at the end or at the beginning. We're going to be relying on your feedback from this, as it's our first webinar. And also, your feedback on these webinars is very important to us so we can get them right for you. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Hi there. I'm Alan Williams, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer of BlinkMobile, also one of the directors of the company. As part of my job, I get the opportunity to travel fairly widely around the world to many conferences, obviously to try and work out where we at BlinkMobile go with our product and our capabilities. But also, it's a great opportunity to understand where the mobile market, the enterprise mobility market, is going. I thought I'd use this session in this webinar to talk about the differences between enterprise mobility and the creation of what are being called hero apps, and why they are quite so different, and why you'd use a mobility platform. And what I'd like to do later on in this presentation is just talk about the way you as partners and users of the system can take advantage of the Blink Mobility platform to get vast increases in productivity for your business processes. So the first thing I want to talk about is the excitement building around the enterprise mobility marketplace. Now, there's a load of excitement out there because there are only so often do you get a major productivity boost for organisations. Those boosts come along, once every 10 or 20 years, and these boosts are boosts of 10 or 20% of increase in productivity. And the mobile marketplace and the mobile devices offer businesses a huge opportunity to look at their business processes, every single business processes within their organisation, and look for productivity improvements through just doing their job better, because by having effectively a computing device on their staff at all times, they can start to really do their jobs better. For example, be able to take photographs, annotate them, add comments, put them into business systems, get information when they're on the go, and be able to make far better choices, be able to do their jobs without having to go into the office so often. All these sorts of things are going to make huge differences to business. The commentators, and I've got a comment here up on a slide by Richard Absalom, who's one of the foremost thinkers for Ovum Consulting. Richard's really pointing to the fact that the enterprise mobility market, this area of improving your business processes through mobility, is really on the cusp. It's only just starting now. And part of the reason is that it's taken a while for enterprises to get around a few of the mechanical things about getting devices into the field. I mean, first of all, they've got to think about how what sort of device policy they're going to have. Is it going to be bring your own device? Are they going to give devices out? How are they going to secure them? How are they going to manage what's on them? Those are exercises that they've got to go through before they then start thinking, well, how am I then going to improve my business processes? Because, of course, you've got to be really careful about security and information and all those sorts of things out there. You don't want your devices falling into the wrong hands and your information being compromised. So those things have exercised a lot of corporations over the last few years. What's happening now is that the attention is going towards, well, what do we do next? And of course, the first thing that happens is that people look for the big productivity gains. And typically people will have a few hero applications they'll develop. And one of them almost always is the application that will connect the company to its end users. For example, if you're an airline, it's the booking application, it's the check-in application. If you're a council. It might be the front end that you give your ratepayers to find out information about things happening in your regional authority, your local authority. But that's only one app or two apps per organisation. And of course, those are very important ones. They're the main touch points between the organisation and their end users. But it's actually that doesn't give you productivity improvements per se. What you'll also find, though, is that organisations are looking for business processes that will give them huge increases in productivity. And typically they'll find one or two in an organisation that cover the whole place and will give them great productivity increases. These are the ones we call hero apps as well. They're internal hero apps, but it's worth organisations spending a lot of money and time and lavish attention and design on those apps. And that costs money. It costs lots of design time, it costs lots of development time, especially if they're going to develop over lots of different platforms. Now, those hero apps are important. People have cut their teeth on them, but the real opportunity for enterprise mobility is wider than that. It's across the whole organisation. And that's where we started to say, okay, well, wait a minute. Is the way that I develop apps across every part of my organisation where I'm going to get a productivity increase the same as the way I do my hero apps? The truth is that it's not, because the amount of time and effort you spend on your hero apps is going to be huge. The amount of time that you spend on every one of those other apps around your organisation can't be the same. You'll go broke. It costs too much. It costs too much time to build, too much time to maintain, etc. So what we're seeing now is a change in the way that organisations think about developing all of their mobility across their organisation. And that's starting to look at activities and how those activities can be improved by mobility. What we're encouraging organisations to do, and what some of our partners are becoming very adept at, is looking at the various business processes in different departments in an organisation and saying, what do I need to do to get a productivity improvement? Maybe it's half an hour a day, by doing one or two things really well. And doing those with the mobile, connecting them to the back-end systems, one or maybe more, and not trying to boil the ocean, not trying to take a whole system and get it down onto the device, but instead look at the activities one by one and say, how can I get a productivity improvement, and plumb it in. And if you do that across many different departments, you're going to get an increasing level of saving and productivity improvement across the whole organisation without having to do too much. But what you are going to have to do is build loads of apps. And it's the building loads of apps that many organisations get concerned about, because apps take time and effort and design to build. And that's where the Blink Mobility platform and other platforms can really help to organisations to deal with that complexity. And so, the connection of and the building of these enterprise apps is fundamentally different. If you're going to do them quickly, you're going to have some ready-to-go components. You're going to have to be able to build these things within a very short time. I mean, you've got to go from thinking about building an app over a 6-month or 3-month period to building an app over a couple of week period. And the reason is that you've got lots of them to do, and agility is absolutely key. You're going to have to build these rapidly, you're going to have to maintain them all the time, improve them all the time, and you're going to have to know when to stop trying to build for a particular department. The idea of failing quickly is really important, because if you don't fail quickly, you end up with exercises that can go on for, say, 2 or 3 months, trying to do mobility for a department, and in the end they don't use it. So one of the great things about a platform is that you can build your apps quickly and then fail quickly. We had at a recent user conference a great example from Sunshine Coast Council, who described how they quite often build an app in one sprint of a week or a couple of weeks to try it out in a department. And if that department doesn't warm to it, if they can see that the department's not ready, they don't pursue it. I think that's a very important thing to be able to do, to fail quickly. So when you start building these apps with a platform like ours, you've got the opportunity to look across your organisation, identify the interactions that are going to make the difference, put them together quickly, get them in front of the users, and get the users to really own that process, to get really enthusiastic about it. And the way you do that is by getting stuff in front of them quickly and showing them, giving them an idea of how it's going to be in the field, and trying to get them to help you design what's going to work for them. And the more you involve them, and the more that they feel ownership of it, the more they're going to want to get this out into the field. And again, you'll see some later on in the webinar, Mitch Bocking from Hornsby Shire Council talking about what they've done in this way. It's very exciting, and to see how getting a user-oriented process activity can really make a difference. So. The other thing about an enterprise mobility platform, of course, is that it's, the idea is to get lots of apps out there. And with the Blink Mobility platform, remember that it's an all-you-can-eat platform, which means that you can have as many apps, as many forms, as many users on the platform as you want. Once you've established your mobility platform price, that covers as many answer spaces, as many forms, as many users as you want. That's very important because the marginal cost to put a new application in is the time it takes you to put it together. There's no more licensing costs, there's no more other hidden costs involved in getting that going. And that's why we encourage you to get, once you've done your first couple of processes, look for more, because you will find additional benefits across your organisation, and there's very, very limited cost of getting to the next one. People like Gosford City Council, for example, have put in 45 or 50 different forms very quickly into their organisation, through their organisation, because there's no limit. And I believe that they're moving forward beyond that now as well. And that's common across our user base. So we really do encourage you to take advantage of that all-you-can-eat aspect of our licensing. Lastly, about the platform, and the platforms are obviously about very rapidly developing these apps and deploying them, and the ready-to-go components of the system are what allow that to happen. But the last thing I want to talk about is the neglected half-time win, and in Blink Mobile Quarterly, our magazine, I make a point about this. One of the things about mobility is that it doesn't have to be done in one big lump. You don't have to connect your mobile front end to your back end systems immediately. Obviously, that's the ideal would be to do so. So you've got straight through processing back and forth into your back end systems. But if you're just not ready to do that, you can still get significant gains in productivity by getting your users using a mobile app and taking that data and storing it in some sort of intermediate data store. And the reason that it's a benefit is because it reduces potentially travel times, it takes advantage of the devices that are on the users, it reduces rekeying, it reduces errors at the front end of data input. You get all those benefits you get from mobility anyway, and you're just not going the final mile to the back-end systems. You're going to an intermediate data store, and then you can look at ways to get from that data store with, obviously more qualified data back into the back-end systems. Now that's a real advantage in its own right, and of course it means that you can get those field-based systems out there really quickly, because you're not going to be worried about the intimate linkage into the back-end systems. Obviously, you'd like to do that later on, and that's a piece of plumbing that can be done later on. But don't neglect the half-time win that you get. You can put in place through a system, through using a product like the Blink Mobility platform. So, really, what I'd like to finish with is to encourage you to think about mobility in your organisation as much more than one or two processes. Start to think of how every single business process in the organisation can be improved, and don't be afraid of trying things out. Get the prototypes out there. They can be done very quickly with our partners or through your own staff. Get those prototypes out there. You don't have to do the plumbing to the back end to start with. You can get the users enthusiastic about what they can do. You can sometimes go to the halfway stage and get data going to and from the devices from an intermediate store. But most importantly, you can actually move quickly across your organisation and get productivity improvements. And that is going to be the really exciting part of enterprise mobility as you begin to see the 10, 20, even 30% improvements in productivity that we've seen in some of our customers. I hope you enjoy the rest of the webinar, and thanks for listening.
My name is Sam Stevens. I'm here this morning with Mitch Blogging from Hornsby Shire Council, and what we're going to do today is run through a case study. Mitch has been working in the site inspections, looking to mobilise their workforce, the guys that are going out into the field and inspecting sites, obviously. And what he's going to do today, a lot of you have probably already read his article that was in the recent Tech Quarterly. And what he's going to do is run through the demo live and show us what he's built and how he's taking advantage of mobile technology to mobilise his workforce. Mitch, over to you.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, if you haven't read my article, it's on page 27. It's a fabulous read, so I suggest you do. As Sam mentioned, this is about our site risk assessments that get conducted out on site before the council crews commence work. So this is a new version that we've developed for our asset operations group, and we will then retrospectively apply that back into the other areas of council. So this version, as you'll see, supports traffic control plan diagrams, also the ability to annotate those diagrams based on the actual work site. And it can also take photos and annotate those, for example, if there's a site-specific risk. It's all about WHS as well. And one good thing we did with this form is we got our WHS department involved. It helped us create one form across council instead of, as I've said in the article, everyone having their own copy of the form and everyone having the best copy of the form. So in this case, we've got work sections. Every work section of council has different risks. For example, asset operations, which will be today's example, has different risks to, say, natural resources or park ranges. And that means once I select the work section, that controls what safe work method statements are displayed, what risks are displayed. But if I select asset operations, that'll then load up the form. And these are all the risks specific to our asset operations. So things like working outdoors, all those risks, cleaning and refueling equipment. But also the first thing it's going to ask me for is my safe work method statement. So we have a business rule. There must be at least one of those applied. Like I said before, our WHS department was heavily involved in this, and our main priority was to keep them happy. So these SWIMs or safe work method statements will be specific to the asset operations group. So if I pick, for example, footpath construction, I can add additional SWIMs, but if I look at the risks, one thing I wanted to do with the design of this form, I wanted to define a risk only once. So for example, traffic is one we'll look at today, so that every part of council has the same. If they have the risk of traffic in their work, then they all share the same one, not all different versions. But before I do that, if I have a look at another risk like UV sun, I just say it's applicable. I have to rate the risk before as it stands, then I apply one or more control measures. For example, sun protection, sunscreen and so on. So that then results in a controlled risk, just in that quick example. So I have an uncontrolled risk, I then apply one or more control measures, and that results in that risk now being controlled. I think they often use the term the risk has been treated. Another design principle I wanted here, if I look at traffic, every work section that has that risk present, they share the same version of that risk. Therefore, it will have the same control measures, which is shown here. So if another crew, like say park maintenance, if they have the traffic risk as well for some of their work, they will end up getting the exact same version of the risk as asset operations and anyone else. So if I do need to change a risk, I just change it in one spot. It instantly applies across all work sections. As I said before, I like to keep WHS happy. So for traffic, I've got control measures like high-vis clothing, safety barriers, a spotter, for example, but one that's of specific relevance here is the TCP, or the Traffic Control Plan diagram. So when I turn that on for the risk, and of course that control measure only applies to the risk of traffic. It doesn't apply to other risks. That then gives me access to a gallery. And I've got on here my Traffic Control Plan diagrams. I can select one of these, and then I can just use that diagram, and then I've got the ability to annotate it. So, for example, if this was not Hornsby Council doing the work, they might have said that's the work area. But since Hornsby Council does a lot more than that, I can easily clear a diagram. This is what Hornsby Council will do. And yes, I did sneak in a little plug there for Hornsby Council. So obviously their teams work pretty hard, so they've got quite a large area to work on that day. What I've also done with these diagrams is allow them to treat them as a sort of a checklist. So you probably can't read the words here, but I can just tick off each of these to say that yes, I've done that for this specific piece of work that I'm doing. So road names, TCP must be attached, and so on. They also have to mark the direction, so that's north. Big boys with big fingers will tend to use a stylus for marking these diagrams, but we don't have one of those today. But I can mark up that diagram until I'm happy. As I said before, I can clear it. Once I'm happy with it, I'll just save it, and that becomes a final or a part of the record when I submit it. What I can also do, I've got all the other, there's quite a few risks here, but on any given piece of work, they'll only be obviously working on a small subset of them. So working outdoors is the one today. If I looked at another risk, I'll see it's got different control measures again, and so on. Probably not relevant for this one, but I'll include that. So once they've done that, what they can also do, they can add photos if they wish. Now, we're in the Blink office today, so there is no such thing as a problem, but I've got to try and find one. We'll just pretend that's a problem over on the floor there. What I can do here, let's say that's out on site, and they've identified a problem, perhaps something that's dangerous to the crew. Whoops, I just used that photo. They can just circle the problem, or they can put an arrow, or they can do whatever, just to annotate the diagram, the photo, and perhaps highlighting a risk. And once I save that, that too will become a final part of the record.
So these are generally photos of the site themselves that they're
there's things like, for example,
actually constructing.
Yeah, and it could be just a risk that they've identified out on site. They want to capture it.
Okay.
And it'll just include that. They don't need to annotate it, but often just helps to highlight it. They can give that a description if they wish. They can add another photo. Then as a final part, they just select the crew member, the crew leader, which will give Marshall something to do today. They, of course, have to sign it. We add our crew members. So I'll just get Zane because he's definitely needs something to do. And sometimes we have crews that come off crew members that come off another crew. We can add them in just in free format text. And again, we just capture their signature as well. So someone who can definitely need something to do. Can you just sign that, please? Thank you.
There we go. I'm hired for my new crew.
Final thing, they just have to do their induction. A lot of these are mandatory fields. And once they submit that, that goes through to our electronic document management system, which is TRIM in our case, and that completes the process. So in short, that's demonstrated different work sections. Each work section has different risks and safe work method statements, and then each risk will have the exact same control measures regardless of which work section it uses. So prior to that, at Hornsby Council, probably others as well, every crew had their own forms with their own control measures, and nothing was really standard, and therefore WHS weren't happy, and you remember what I said about that before. So that's probably the end of the demo. Thank you for your time.
Hi, Alan Williams. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of BlinkMobile and also one of the directors. As you'll see, this section is called Risky Business. Now, you might be thinking that a Chief Technology Officer is keen to keep things moving forward all the time. And I am, but actually I'm really quite paranoid about upgrades to anything to do with my own computing environment. Certainly I'm quite well known for resisting upgrades to my Mac OS until the last possible moment, and when I'm absolutely sure everything's fine. And I'm sure many of you are like that as well, and particularly about enterprise systems. So what I'm going to do here is talk about the approach we're taking with the Blink Mobility platform to reduce risk and to make sure that upgrades and new releases are introduced with as few stresses and problems as possible. So I'm just going to go through two major aspects to managing risk, and hopefully it'll give you a sense of how we move the platform forward with in a nice, smooth and controlled manner. To start with, let's talk about what we call the main upgrade process, and let's start with a running production system. And so what you'll see in the slide here is our typical environment. It's not everything about our environment, it's really pointing out that there's a load balancer where all the requests for service come in, and the load balancer distributes those requests for service across different compute instances, which are basically virtual machines, and they sit in the Amazon infrastructure, and those in turn access your answer space configurations, etc., in a relational database system. And that is basically the core of a production system, and that sort of runs along in a very sort of fault tolerant and highly available manner. When we come to do an upgrade, what we do is we don't try and replace the code that's in an existing running environment. The first process we go through is what we call a release candidate stage. So once we've got a release code that we feel is strong enough to be tested by our customer base and our partners as a whole, we release it in a parallel environment, basically a completely separate parallel set of services within Amazon called which we call a release candidate. And that allows you to test all of your existing answer spaces, all the functionality, against the new release of our software without affecting your existing production environment. Now this process will go on until everybody who's tested are really comfortable that it's all working well. And once we're comfortable, we're down to minimal major bugs, and obviously most processes there are some residual issues at the end, but usually very minor. Once we get to that stage, we then prepare ourselves to go into production, and that is where the magic of Amazon Web Services comes into its own, because we have the capability then to do our cutover without actually bringing anything down, because what we do in our cutover is change the destinations of the load balancers from the old production system to the release candidate. A release candidate becomes the new production system. Obviously we boost the size of it up to full production capacity and everything, but the code remains exactly the same as the last thing that was tested. And so, again, now once we're comfortable, there's no change to the running code of the release candidate to make it production. What that also means is that the old production environment is still there. So if there's any problem major problem with the release, with the new production environment, we can cut back onto the old production environment almost immediately. The actual time involved in switching from one to the other is in milliseconds. I mean, nobody will notice the cutover at all. And so it really is a 100% uptime move from one release to another. And so that in its own right has reduced the risk of upgrades. And we use this process both for major releases, which are very seldom, and the regular update process, where we update typically one thing in the system at a time. We still go through this process to make sure that we can go back to a previous running production environment in case there are any issues. And so this is our standard process, and as you'll see, that's it's a pretty seamless way of doing things. Okay, let's talk about the other area, which we've spent quite a bit of time on engineering the risk out of upgrades on a modular basis as well. So what we talked about just now was the movement of our main platform code between release to release. The other way you can reduce risk is by making sure that all the different components of the system can work with each other at different release levels. And so we can do modular releases. Now, if you look at the Blink Mobility platform, there are three main components that work with each other. Obviously, there's the main back-end core system, which you might regard as the core platform. Then there's the client software that we call it the Blink Intelligent Client, or BIC. And that's all of the software that lands on the phone or the tablet, the device. And then there's the app shell that surrounds the web app framework if you are producing it as an app for iOS or for Android or for Windows Phone soon. So each of those components, the web app, or the app shell, the BIC, and the platform, it would be ideal if we can move those forward individually without breaking the other parts as well. And in fact, that's what we've aimed at. So right now, you can move the version of the app shell on an answer space by answer space basis without actually changing the BIC or the platform that versions that it runs with. So it means that you can make improvements in the app shell, and we can release for you an improved app shell that only you need to upgrade to, and it can be done at your leisure, and you don't have to move everything forward at the same time. The same is true of the Blink Intelligent Client. For those of you who are using BIC 3, the new version of the BIC, this is already in place. So with BIC 3, you can choose a version of the BIC, or a new version of the BIC can be released, and you don't have to upgrade. You don't have to be on a particular version of the platform. So we can move the BIC forward without moving the platform forward. Very important modular change. We are going to be doing this for the BIC 2 as well, and that will be in the next major release. That hasn't come out yet, but expect that later in the year. So just by modularizing the app shell upgrades and the BIC upgrades, we've de-risked a lot of the upgrade or the potential for issues with upgrades. The last one, of course, is the platform as a whole. Now, right now, in a multi-tenanted platform, you have to move forward when everybody else moves forward. It's a fairly low risk upgrade, but of course, it's on a particular day. You are that will happen alongside everybody else, and it happens for all answer spaces and all clients at the same time. Our objective is to make that an answer space by answer space upgrade to a new platform, and that means that we're going to have to put in what we're calling a version switch into the platform that will allow us to run multiple parallel live production environments of the platform and allow people to move from one version to the next at their convenience, and once they've tested all of their environment. That version switch is very much a live project in our R&D team, and that's what we're going to be moving to again, hopefully in the next major release, and you'll see that before the end of the year. So with that, we'll have upgrade modularity across all the major parts of the platform on an answer space by answer space basis, and that really will reduce the risk and of upgrades and allow you to test just for yourself and be, once you're completely comfortable, move across into the new environment. And we think that's will set everybody's minds at rest and allow you to sleep just that much better. Thank you.
I'm here to talk about Evergreen Apps. This is based on an article that Alan Williams, our CTO, wrote for our quarterly magazine. So if you haven't already done so, you should go read it. I'm the product manager. Today we'll be discussing a few of these terms. These terms get used a fair bit and in all kinds of weird little fuzzy ways. So hopefully by the end of this webinar, we'll have clarified these terms. So Evergreen is an approach that allows you to deliver changes directly to your users. So you can make changes to your behavior or layout, you can fix a bug or add a feature, and that goes directly from you to your users. Ordinarily, without Evergreen, you might have to go through Apple's App Store review process, which can take several weeks or months if there's a rejection. The web is naturally evergreen, and we use web technologies to make our forms and our interactions evergreen. Typical native and hybrid apps have evergreen components. So if you look at popular social networking apps like Twitter, the content for those apps is delivered in an evergreen fashion. You don't need to update the entire Twitter app to find out what your friend ate for dinner last night. However, if there's a bug in the layout or the behavior or the logic of the Twitter app, then they have to go through the whole app update cycle, which would involve an App Store review and isn't very direct. So the benefit of our hybrid apps is we've pushed as much of the behavior and layout logic into a way that can be delivered in an evergreen manner as possible. So that allows you to deliver updates to the behavior and layout and logic without having to go through the whole app update cycle. You only need to do an app update cycle if there's a change to the native specific functionality. So that might be something like a new API in iOS 8 or a new camera or a new sensor or something like that. Ordinarily, behavior and bug fixes can just be pushed straight on through to users. So what do we mean by offline? This is a really small word with lots of different implications, and so it's a bit of a loaded term. Generally though, offline means that stuff works good even if the network connection isn't good. But what stuff are we talking about here? So these are BlinkMobile components that are often associated with offline functionality. So we've got data suitcases and form records and the pending queue for disconnected forms. Even our interactions are offline accessible, except for Maddle interactions, because those involve the server. And if you can't talk to the server, then the server can't be involved. And the one we're currently working on is cold boot. So this is where the app can be accessed even if it wasn't already running recently. So yeah, what do we mean by cold boot? So we've got the level of cold boot that we're aiming at is primed cold boot. And this means that the user has to open the app to prime it and they have to be online to do that. Anytime they open the app after that, though, once it's primed, it's good to go. So you don't need a network connection after that first time. Examples of that are web apps that have been enhanced with App Cache. That's an HTML5 technology. Our own iOS hybrid app already has this feature built in, and we're working on this for our Android and Windows Phone hybrid apps. So there's an extra special level of cold boot that native apps tend to have typically, and that's where you can open the app right after you install it, even if you were never ever online. So we're calling that anytime cold boot. At this point, it's unlikely to be able to deliver this in using web technology by itself, and it's a bit of a weird case because often your users will need to go online anyway at least once to do something. And even your favorite social networking app is pretty useless if you have never ever been online with it. So at this point, we're pushing it off into the someday bucket. So importantly, you can have your cake and eat it too. So cold boot has been a challenge for us because we've had to rethink how do we keep the evergreen goodness whilst giving you the cold boot goodness, and we have an approach that means you get to have both. That's it.
Six months ago, Parks and Leisure Australia engaged BlinkMobile to be a part of their annual conference. This was the 5th year running that we've supported this annual event. Instead of the many price style of conference apps, which we sorted to deliver, everything from paper-based agendas to speaker bios, get me there maps, we wanted to attack this conference a little bit differently. We sought to gain the engagement and involvement from all the delegates there, both during and following the event, and provide PLA a forum to better interact with their staff and the delegates. We decided to cull a lot of information we would typically have included in the app, such as speaker biographies, session presentations, the Get Me There maps, and the static information that really played no part on an app directly. What we were left with was a new concept of how to deliver a conference app. A simple agenda comprising of a title, date, time, location, and a unique hashtag. A unique Twitter feed on each agenda item derived from the unique hashtag. The ability to tweet directly from the app on the agenda item rather than using a third-party application. Having each agenda item added to the device's calendar rather than using stars. Flickr integration to allow a stream of photos to the device from the conference's Flickr accounts. The ability to upload pictures directly from a device into the conference's Flickr accounts. And more importantly, a lead generation form on every sponsor's page that went directly through to the sponsor's email contacts. Moving away from the standalone method in place, we identified a newer, faster, and more efficient way to create the agenda through the Blink Mobility platform. What has previously taken 10 hours worth of data entry now took less than 2 hours. Authentication for Twitter was handled by OAuth. Now at this point I'd like to introduce Sam Stevens just to give you a brief outlay of what he did to integrate Twitter into the application.
No worries, thanks Jay. Jay's mentioned OAuth. Essentially, this is the method we use to validate the user with Twitter. The idea behind the Twitter integration was to allow the users to actually view the live Twitter feeds within the app, but also to post their own comments directly from the app as well, instead of sending them out to either their own Twitter app or via the website. So basically what we're doing is looking at putting everything within the app and giving total control. So that obviously brings up the issue with how are we going to validate users. Now OAuth, as Joe mentioned earlier, is essentially a service which allows you to authenticate a user with a remote site such as Twitter, and and bring back control to the app. So the method with Twitter, essentially what we did, we had the login to Twitter icon on the front page. When the user clicks on that, what will pop up is what we call the child browser window. Essentially, it's a window that pops up on the page and directs the user seamlessly over to the Twitter website. Now, once on Twitter, they can log into their own account there. So the important part here is they're actually entering their username and password into Twitter. And once they've signed in, what Twitter does is pass a token back to our own app. Essentially, that's basically the method of authentication. We'll go into a little bit more detail later on. But by holding that token on the device, that essentially allows us to validate the user. They're a real Twitter user, and then from there, these people can then post a tweet on their own feed. Flickr was a little bit different. As with all of these services, they all have their own interesting terms and conditions. Twitter do have an API. They do also allow OAuth authentication, but what we found with this one was it actually ended up being easier to integrate directly with Flickr's email system. This is for a couple of reasons. As you know, when you take a photo on a mobile phone, the image is going to come out very high resolution. You end up with a giant photo. We're talking a couple of megabytes worth of photo, and transmitting that over the phone system can obviously take a little while unless you have Wi-Fi. So what we did was employ one of the Blink forms. Part of the standard features in a Blink app is the ability to shrink down images on the device before you send them remotely. So what we allowed was the user could take a photo on their device. The Blink app shell shrinks that photo down to a much more sensible size, and then submits that again via the BlinkMobile's email system through to Flickr, and Flickr lodges the photograph within the particular account we set up.
At this point, I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough of the app. I must stress that the features we talked about in this session can only be achieved by appifying the answer space. Now, having a look at the app, again, this is the actual home screen itself. I've taken the liberty of signing into Twitter already, so that way we don't have to muck around with username and passwords. But essentially, the app itself will remember the user each time it comes back in or you reopen the app. So having a look through at the agenda quickly, it's broken down into day, and that's the beauty of demonstrations live. It's broken into day and then room, and the actual agenda item itself. Now here, as you can see, we have an add to calendar option as well as a Twitter feed directly. Now you can see the the tweet box. It's pre-populated with the hashtag. We did this to force users to use these particular hashtags to ensure that all the tweets, and particularly this conference, was trending on Twitter. Simply by tweeting directly from the app, we're using the app to tweet. We're not going to a tweet deck, and we're keeping the users inside essentially this particular walled garden. Now we added another neat feature where we would have the agenda directly add itself or add the item to the calendar. So rather than using stars and data suitcases, we thought we'd integrate it with the device's native features such as the calendar. So by simply adding to calendar, that particular item is added, and it will update you via reminders during the course of the day when you've got items appearing within your calendar. Having a look at the pictures now, the photo stream taken directly from Twitter is a simple feed of all the pictures that were taken during that particular day. And again, as you can see, it's just a number of pictures. This was all content that can be used for the particular conference next year. And again, the conference organisers were really happy with this. It allowed them to have fresh content. It will allow them to have fresh content each year. Now, I'm not going to go through and upload a picture because this account is still live, and this is the client's account. Finally, having a look at sponsors, and we'll just select A Play there. With the sponsors, again, the beauty of doing demonstrations live, going into sponsors and clicking on A Play, it allowed us to have a bio for A Play. And again, a simple lead generation form which would submit to the to the sponsors' email contact. If you want to have a look at this app yourself, you can go through and check it out through the magazine. There's a link to download it directly for iOS and Android devices. So at this point, I'd just like to reintroduce Sam just to discuss the benefits of how OAuth can be used for other applications.
Now, when we were going through the Twitter information before, one of the things I mentioned was when we're logging in, we're actually sending the user to the Twitter's website, and then Twitter's sending a secure token back again. Now, just that that particular feature gives us a lot of there's a lot of benefits. The first one, the big one, is it's much more secure, especially for the user. When they enter their details, they're entering it into Twitter's website, not ours. They're not entering it into the app at all. So that totally separates the user's input from our particular app, which when you're developing an app like this that takes a lot of the security burden off you because Twitter's handling all of that. All we're seeing is basically a giant random token. The second benefit of that is you also don't need to manage, store, or create user accounts as well. It's actually a really handy way of rapidly producing these apps and authenticating users by using existing services. Well, we've been speaking about Twitter in this particular case, but there's OAuth in particular is very popular, and a lot of different services will do this. So Twitter, Facebook, a couple of the obvious social networking ones, LinkedIn, Gmail, the entire Google system, there's Microsoft ones. There's essentially what we're doing is harnessing existing login details in existing systems, allowing them to take care of all the security side of it, and then we're just grabbing the authentication back again. I've already mentioned the next point here on the slide is it does lessen the security burden. You don't need to worry about actually taking people's credentials and then worrying about how you're going to store them securely. We don't have to worry about storing them on a remote server or even on the local device. So it actually takes a lot of the work off you as well. Being single sign-on is obviously a lot easier for the user as well. They don't need to create new accounts. They don't need to remember new passwords. They don't need to go through the steps of actually creating a new account either. So for this kind of app where I believe we wouldn't have actually had as many signups, rather, if they actually did have to go through the steps of signing up, by harnessing accounts they already have. Someone who might look at it and go, oh, no, I can't be bothered signing that form out. If they see, hey, log in with Twitter, no worries at all, might as well, I'll check it out. So I believe that it can actually increase, in a lot of cases, your usage in the field as well, because it's just a lot less work for the user to do. The method we used, I sort of touched on this a little bit before when you click on a login button and it brings up the child browser window, which essentially allows you to bring the content of a remote site in and display it to the user without kicking them out of the app. So we're not moving the user over to Safari, for example, or an internet browser. They're staying within the app the entire time. Now, this same method can be used from any number of providers. We spoke about OAuth, but there's also a lot of similar systems, a lot of different single sign-on systems, which will allow you to use the exact same technology and have the same effect. And We'll probably talk about this possibly in the Q&A section of there. But all of this work we've done is available to you as well. Example code, that kind of thing. We're happy to discuss it and help you out as much as you like.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sam. Look, finally, as a direct result of the work we undertook with this particular app, we saw the uptake rate of this app from the delegates rise from 15% from last year's conference through to 84% with this year's conference. Engagement methods had all the PLA hashtags trending on Twitter over the 3-day conference, and the PLA administrators have, again, fresh content to use for next year's promotion of the actual event. Moving away from the actual conference side of it and how this could be applied in other real-world scenarios, councils can be generating ratepayer media content and using that as through their online campaigns. Airports could be have users directly tweeting as they enter into the or as they leave the departure lounge, and all enterprises can be interacting with their clients and business partners directly through the one app. Now, I hope you've taken a lot away from this session. Again, as Sam touched on, we'll be answering more questions during the Q&A later on in the webinar. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
My name's Ray Pearce. I'm from BlinkMobile support team.
I'm Rachel. I also work with Ray on support.
We look after all the 24-hour, 7-day-a-week support for the platform, and that does include looking after the services, making sure the infrastructure stays up, and general and technical support for our partners and clients.
Yeah, we've got 24-hour support, as you know. We've got pager, we've got an emergency hotline, so if there's any problems at any time of the day, we're here to help you.
And what we're talking about this morning is basically just going an overview of some of the pitfalls you may deal with when looking at developing the Android platform. Now, as part of the BlinkMobile support team, we've already done a lot of the hard stuff for you, all the compatibility issues with browsers, operating systems, devices, hardware, software, carriers, and a vast array of different things that make it the consistency of what you're trying to deliver to your customer.
Yeah, basically we've done all the hard work for you and just put it all together. It's part of the platform, and that should make it easier for you to deliver solutions to your customers.
So just some of the things that we've realised in the last 18 months or so of supporting the BlinkMobile platform. Originally, we saw a lot of applications specifically designed for iOS devices. We're now seeing a bit of a trend towards more of the Android market, primarily because of the cheaper, the vast array of different devices, sizes, screens, etc. And the poor little old Apple's getting a bit of a beating from the robot at the moment. And so this morning we figure we talk about some of the pitfalls that we've seen when people have tried to develop some of these solutions in the Android market.
One of the main reasons that we're seeing a trend towards Android as opposed to iOS is cost. You can get some pretty cheap Android devices compared to a decently priced iOS device. With our Android app shell and platform, as we said before, we handle most of the functionality in the native app shell code base, and we've put a lot of thought into keeping the user experience consistent across all the Android devices that are available. And as you know, there are plenty of different versions of Android and different Android devices available.
So let's look at today's Android market. You can buy devices ranging from $50 Australian right up to $2,000. You can buy tablets, you can buy phones, you can buy even washing machines, dryers, everything pretty well these days has an Android thing in it. Effectively now you can wash your clothes, and when your washing machine finishes, it can send you a tweet and let you know that's finished. So choice is vast these days. So let's look at the Android market.
So in today's Android market, there are plenty of Android devices. According to statistics brought out in August, we've got 18,796 distinct Android devices. And of those devices, we've got a 43% market share with Samsung in the lead there. And unfortunately, only about 20% of devices are using the latest software, which isn't very much. When you think about it, not many Android devices are up to date with the latest software. So let's talk about software fragmentation.
Although the BlinkMobile platform has optimised to suit most browsers and operating systems, there's still a difference with Android devices. In many countries, a considerable amount of devices are still running Android 2.2 with a built-in open source browser, which is not a very smart browser at all. 93% of Apple devices are actually running on the latest operating system, and that becomes very difficult when you're trying to develop something with a fragmented market. When developing for Android devices, you really need to know the audience you're targeting and their deployment strategy. You always need to look at, there's going to be a pool of devices where you've got the latest operating system running 4.4 and you've got some people running back. Primarily, a lot of tablets that are delivered today still run Android 4, in particular Samsung devices, and their browsers are not very clever.
So when you're developing with Apple products, you've got very strict guidelines around what needs to be added and what you can and can't do. It's not the same with Android. There's much more flexibility, and in that case, we need to design our products with extra functionality, including extra security functionality, so that we're on par and we have a more secure solution. So some things that developers need to keep in mind is things like login security, domain whitelisting, and data sovereignty. Another thing that we can or should look at is privacy. Developers should always use secure protocols when delivering client data, and also use secure networks and try and eliminate any man-in-the-middle attacks.
Another area to look at with Android development too is the carrier interaction. A lot of carriers, in particular in Australia, will put on a lot of bloatware, other information, their own choice of browsers, their own type of navigation tools, etc. This can be quite painful when you're actually trying to develop an answer space with all these other things in mind.
We had one issue recently
That's right,
with Samsung and 4.1 devices, where Samsung had actually removed XPath from the device, and that caused us a great amount of issues. And that's just a great example of how the carriers can change an individual device and cause issues for customers, and make it difficult for them to run certain protocols and certain things.
Yeah, that particular problem was in New Zealand. It was to do with a particular Samsung tablet on a particular carrier. So we had to actually go and get a device and try and replicate that carrier, that device in that country. Another issue with carriers is often they will hold off releasing software updates, so primarily they can push you along with another hardware sale.
Absolutely. So Android's a great solution, and with every release we're finding less fragmentation. So it's a good idea to keep in mind that the market does have challenges, and there are some challenges that the ecosystem and other devices, even if they're cheaper, underpowered, sometimes they might not be an economical solution for that. So we've discussed the perils of Android related to hardware fragmentation, software fragmentation, security, and carrier customization. So some things to keep in mind when you're developing for Android might be ask for advice, ask us for help, ask questions, ask your support people questions like, what device should I be buying? And have a look at a device matrix showing what devices can and can't do. Do they have a camera? Couldn't they use the signature panel in our BlinkMobile platform?
So just to sum up this morning's topic, when dealing with the Android market and designing solutions for it, just keep in mind the following things. Hardware fragmentation. All hardware is different, different memory sizes, screens, physical buttons, etc. Always try to keep your design based around the minimal requirement you need.
We've also touched on software fragmentation. So with regard to that, remember that there are many different versions of Android out there in the world, ranging from some really low versions, 2.2, all the way up to 4.4. And remember that only 20% of people have adopted the latest version of Android.
We've also talked about security, keeping in mind the difference with data sovereignty, using secure protocols when absolutely possible, making sure that your software or your answer space is not touching the devices, calendars, contacts, cameras, and particular microphones in particular to do with any privacy issues.
And again, we also looked at carriers and carrier customization. And that's where carriers can actually modify the version of Android, causing problems for users. So bear that in mind when choosing devices as well.
And again, if you've got any concerns about how you're going to develop it, firstly, know your audience, know your deployment strategy for your client. And we're always here to help you if you need any information, or you can contact your partner support or our pre-sales guys here at BlinkMobile.
We also have a device matrix available, publicly available on our help desk. So feel free to go there, have a look, see which devices are supported and which devices will run on cameras, signature panels, etc. And also another thing to be aware of is the difference between Android browsers. Some of the old browsers, they don't support certain parts of software, and just bear that in mind when developing for Android as well.
Yes, you can forget about your selfies, and most of them don't do selfies these days. So if you need any more information or any help from us, we're available at support@blinkmobile.com.au.
Well, hi everybody. I hope you found that useful first. So it's pretty much warts and all, but it's great to have you along. So Q&A session here now, and thanks for your input so far, guys. It's been useful. I'll just introduce everybody in a second, but I want to say first, remember that this is a partner-only one at the moment. We've got a user webinar this afternoon, and so any questions right now are to partners only. And I'm sure that we'll get other sorts of questions this afternoon. Next, thanks very much to Mitch Bocking, because he did a great demonstration, great, really, really impressive application, and shows so much of what is good about the platform. Unfortunately, Mitch can't be here today. He couldn't spend the hour and a half that we needed to. He's back at council, and we haven't got Jay on the panel here either. He's behind the scenes in front of me. So just over to the whole panel here. We've got Sam on the right here, Ron, our development manager, Rachel, and Ray in support, who you all saw in the sessions. So. What we'll do is we've got a couple of questions to start with, and please feel free to put more on them. I've got them in front of me here that I'll pick those up. So to start with, thanks Brett for your question about demos and a showcase, and you've already seen a response from Tony saying that look, we're more than happy to make more and more demonstrations available. I know that the partner that works with you is also providing with those too. Sam, do you want to say anything more about presentations and demonstrations and other things we could show, particularly some of the cool stuff that we can show?
Yeah, definitely. As we're building new features into the platform or taking advantage of new technologies, part of what we do here is sort of build these out into apps that can be used as examples. So all of these examples are available to any of the partners. We can actually give you the entire block of code. You can brand it with your own logos, colours, etc. So there's a couple of ways they can be delivered. We can give you, as I mentioned, give you the entire answer space code, so you can set them up in your own answer spaces and present them that way. Or you can also deliver them through the master app. So some of the demonstrations, especially things like photo annotations, they need to be delivered through a app shell. So what we have is the master app, which allows you to deliver those apps and show functionality that needs to run inside the app shell. So you're more than welcome to all of those. Please do send through the requests, and we're quite happy to pass them along.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Sam. Hope that answers the question, Brett. Kyle's question about the automatic upgrades once we put in the version switch that we're talking about, which will be coming in a future release. And that question was in regard to what happens now is, of course, everybody moves on to the next version of the platform at the same time. And in my presentation, I said, well, look, we're going to be putting in a version switch at some point, and that's going to allow answer space by answer space upgrades. Ron, perhaps if you can just say what will happen when we do go to the version switch.
When we first roll it out, it will be manual and opt-in only, but I guess based on demand, we'll see if we can later roll out the ability to stay on the bleeding edge, or I guess have you specify your risk appetite.
Yeah, I guess the thing that the message we got loud and clear is that people don't like automatic upgrades. That mostly people want to go when they want to go, not when we tell you to go. So we've envisaged this as a do it when you want to, not do it when we tell you. But as Ron said, we'll listen to what you say, and if we get the automatic is better message, we'll see to that then. A couple of other notes. We've got a question from Gustavo about, you're not going to like this, Ron, Windows Phone and cold boot, because we've obviously just started the cold boot and evergreen cold boot stuff that Ron's been talking about. We've been working on that. It's been a real live project all of this year. And the question about Windows Phone and cold boot. Now, clearly it's going to be in our product plans, but presumably a while, Ron.
Well, it's actually we're considering it a key component for the initial Windows Phone release. And there's quite a few shared components between how we're approaching it for Android and how we're approaching it for Windows. So we've been, I guess, following those parallel paths in tandem for a bit. And yeah, we hope to have something you guys can test and play with by the end of October.
So that means then that we're expecting the cold boot to be part of that as well.
Yeah, so our intention is not to release the Windows Phone app until it has that baked in from day one. Okay,
well that's really a very positive answer for you, Gustavo, and I'm pleased to hear that. From Kaina, do you have any plans to have an app factory for Android app shells? Who's the right person to answer that? I guess it's you, Ron.
We're exploring, I guess, how best to approach that. We're playing around with a few ideas, and we definitely don't want it to be a case where a human being is involved every single time an Android app needs to be pressed. I guess stay tuned. Watch this space.
Yeah, we want to try and minimise the load on our support group in cutting these things. So it's a pretty key thing for us, just for efficiency within the company, and obviously for yourselves as well. But obviously, the fact is that when you need an Android app, we'll try and produce it as quickly as possible. And Ray and Ray and Rachel have been very, very responsive on that. Let's have a look at these other ones. Can we touch, from Mark Slocum, hi Mark, can we touch on iOS 8 and what our testings come up with? Actually, do you guys want to, Ray and Rachel, do you want to handle that one?
We were quite happy with the way that the platform is actually taken off with iOS 8. The only problem we have at the moment is an issue with Safari in itself and Signature Panel. Apple hasn't really followed the guide rules which they used to when they changed in iOS 8. So we will see, just in Safari, a problem with the Signature Panel not closing when it's supposed to. But as far as all the rest of our testings go, we haven't found anything untoward. So the platform has been moving quite well on iOS 8.
Yeah,
That's fine.
everything seems to work really well except for that one little issue where you write in the signature panel and then it doesn't close when you ask it to commit that signature that you've written. And that's not something that's our platform issue. That is an iOS 8 issue. So,
And
unfortunately,
is that in the browser only, or is that in the app as well?
browser only.
Browser only.
only.
just
So
browser.
app shells are absolutely perfectly fine and run well. It's just that one little thing in Safari browser on
And-
iOS 8.
Anyone designing answer-based solutions for iOS 8 at the moment, one thing I have noticed is the accessibility is considerably better, especially for vision impaired people. It's absolutely great what Apple's done with just overall accessibility in iOS 8 is considerably better than what it was in iOS 7.
Okay, so from the point of view in terms of iOS 8, obviously that browser issue is probably the only major gotcha, and we know that almost all of you in commercial situations are using apps to deliver, or app shells to deliver the apps you're getting out into your customers. So I imagine that's not going to be a huge issue, but again, let us know if it is. But this is an issue with iOS. As a matter of interest, by the way, until the sort of gold release that came out, we were finding loads and loads and loads of problems right up until really the last couple of cuts of it. So Apple had to get their act together, at very, very short notice as well. So there are still a few gremlins in iOS 8 in general. Let's look at a couple of other ones. Mark's got a note from Suds saying, same here on iOS 8, particularly widgets, extensions and inter-app data sharing, etc. Mark, Hato 2 released last night. Yep. Another question regarding iOS 8, guys. What about Apple Health, digital signature, the biometric stuff, and also Passbook? What are we going to be doing with those? Is there any? How would we integrate those?
Well, we can make those available to you based on feedback, and we're really interested to see what use cases you have in mind when you're asking for these features. Generally speaking, if Apple makes it available, we can pass on that availability. It's just based on how important it is for your use cases.
Okay, so yeah, thanks, Ron. Next one from Kyle. Could there be automatic upgrades for security issues separately from feature upgrades?
Yes. So one of the things we aspire to following, I guess, is a thing called semantic versioning. It's SEM, M for Mary, ver.org, and it's a system of describing just how drastic a change is between two versions. So when we have that in place, you'll be able to look at any two versions of the platform and know that only a bug was fixed, or this one added new features, or this one broke something. You'll just know that hopefully by looking at the numbers, and it should then be very possible to allow you to say, well, obviously I don't want things to break underneath me, but if there's a bug fixed, I'd like that automatically. So it'll definitely be possible to specify that. I guess it just depends on your feedback.
Okay, well, thanks, Ron. I think that's all the current questions on the stream. There are a couple of ones that come to mind that come out of some of the articles in this webinar, and I'll ask them to particularly Ron on one of these. For the first one is, do I have to design my apps differently for offline first? And this whole business of having offline capability is great, but is there a different way of thinking when you do offline first?
Well, as I covered in my webinar, the Maddle interactions are a server-based technology, so they can't work when the app has no connectivity to the server. So one thing you might want to consider is moving static content to message and other types of interactions. and reserving modal interactions for things that really, really need connectivity. There's a few other. Actually, one other thing you can do now is if you want to see how your answer space will perform in the offline first app, you can enable offline mode in answer space settings and just use Chrome or Firefox or just your standard web browser to see what's available when connectivity is not turned on. That should give you some ideas of what might need to be adjusted.
Okay, thank you. And another one about app shells in general, and this comes back to Mitch's presentation. Do you have to have an app shell to do annotations and that cool stuff we saw with the gallery and the drawing and stuff?
It's technically feasible to offer that within a modern web browser. So we're not talking IE8 or 9, and I don't think 10. So we currently have this offered in the native apps because there's better control and better APIs for doing those things, but we can definitely offer it in the web app. It's just based on all the other important things you want us to do.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Okay, Suds, you've asked a question that I knew somebody was going to ask, and that is, do we have a solid goal time frame for BIC3 and Forms 3 being production ready? And I think it's been a journey with BIC3 and Forms 3, and it's fundamentally and rather large change underneath, which has taken time. I mean, I think it's probably worth, well, actually, before I pass this over to Ray and Rachel, because in terms of where we are with the outstanding issues on those products, I'd like to just say that one of the things that we have done in a couple of, or a number of sprints within the company is focus on solidifying those over the last few months with all of your input as well. I'll just pass over to Ray and Rachel to talk about the current outstanding issues list on those.
Oh, okay. Put on the spot. Great. BIC3 in its whole is a great platform. Specifically, want to leverage a lot of the heavier and more proprietary JavaScript languages out there. It's ideal for that navigation purpose. There's a few minor issues with forms that we've still got to work out. But as far if you're just using if you want to use BIC3 as a very dynamic and very feature-rich process, it's probably a great use of a BIC. And it works now optimised very well with both the Android app shells and also the iOS app shells as well.
Yeah, what we've been doing internally is reviewing the BIC and actually trying to work out where its pain points are. So in the last couple of sprints, we've spent time building BIC-V3 apps, playing with them, going through issues and problems with the developers and the people who are actually developing the app, particularly Sam here, because he does a lot of BIC-V3 development at the moment, asking for feedback and trying to get the issues that are reported fixed in the sprints. So probably sprints for about the last 2 months or so have had a substantial number of BIC-V3 issues included, which means that we're fixing the issues and trying to find out where any of the new ones are. So as far as where it stands now, it's pretty solid. We know there are a few issues that we've currently got ready to go for the next few sprints. Aside from that, I'm feeling pretty confident about where it's headed and that it will be ready and easy to use. So again, if you do find issues with the BIC when you're actually developing, send them through, because your feedback is important. It really is. We'd appreciate that.
Yeah. Also, by the way, Forms 3 has had a big push as well. Ron, is there anything you want to say about Forms 3 and where we stand with that?
Well, it's a work in progress. Yeah. It's being polished and having some of the things that are missing when you compare it to Forms 2. Some of those things are being backfilled, I guess. Yeah, I guess one of the things we've tried to do is make it possible. We want very much for you guys to be empowered to do all the things that we ourselves can do. So we've tried very hard to keep Forms 3 open. The documentation for it's coming, and you'll be able to extend it in ways that you are that are kind of dangerous to extend in Forms 2. So the cool things that were kind of dangerous back then, we want to make possible and commonplace with Forms 3. So I guess that's the aspiration.
Yeah. The big change with both BIC 3 and Forms 3 is this business of extensibility. We started talking about it last year, and we started saying we get the message we've got really clearly from you guys as partners is that you want to be able to extend the product without the danger of us breaking stuff around it. And in order to do that, there had to be an infrastructure, a structure that you could rely on, and that's what is in BIC 3, and it's what's in Forms 3. That's what Ron's referring to there. That is ultimately a great goal, and that's there are issues. There have been issues in getting there. We're very, very close to that now. I mean, just one final thing on this. Sam internally has done more work, with many of you, in fact, on BIC 3 and Forms 3. And Sam, do you want to say anything about your experience of using those?
Yeah, definitely. There's one of the things I'm really excited about actually with BIC 3 and Forms 3 in general was some of this stuff that Ron touched on, the stuff that was really difficult to do or dangerous to do in BIC 2. The APIs that are available in BIC 3 are amazing, just giving us for the developers just really good access to things that we just couldn't touch before. So like pending queues and the manipulation you're able to do, tapping into forms, definitions, stuff like this. It's a really quite exciting platform. Some of the stuff that I've been doing, Al mentioned, we've been working on some of this stuff internally. What we've done a lot of testing internally here, but what we're actually doing now is taking live BIC 2 projects, dropping them into BIC 3, and just seeing what happens. There's obviously no better testing than actually testing something live and real that's out in the field, testing that in BIC 3, and that's going to help us nail down those last few issues.
Okay. Now, thanks, Sam. Okay, a couple more come in. Input from Wanda in Brazil. Flexibility in forms. What plans and what does BlinkMobile have in mind as new features to make it more flexible? Layout, database connection and things. Say something about that?
So layout flexibility is already somewhat secretly available in Forms 3. There are APIs to modify the form definition, and you can add what we're tentatively calling sections, and these sections add extra markup to the page, which you can add additional layout styles and other CSS properties to. So we've seen internally, we've seen this being used for multi-column layouts, but once you've got those extra elements in there, you can add whatever CSS you like, pretty much. What were the other parts of the
database connection?
Okay, so is that
probably like Link Now, or linkage through the database connector?
Yeah, I guess at the moment we offer MySQL connectors, and we know there's demand for additional types of database connectors like SQL Server, maybe Oracle, all the other different types of databases out there. For the most part, I guess this is a point of differentiation between the different resellers at the moment. Some of those have built their own adapters. We're keen to bring more of those in-house as there's room for them, but we want to make sure that however we do it is done in a way that's properly extensible and documented. So when we add a database connector to the system, we want you to be able to add a database connector yourselves just as easily.
Okay. So I think that's pretty much brought us to the end of the the main webinar, and the questions. As a note from Wanda that apparently there's already a couple of other issues with iOS 8. Wanda, if you can just make sure that the guys here know about anything that you're finding with iOS 8. We want to jump on that, immediately. Obviously, we're not finding anything in our testing that's causing us hassle other than the thing we already know about. Okay, I think there's one last point I'd like to make, and that is that the conference app technologies that you saw, and any other sort of technologies you've seen in this, do you think more widely, that the stuff you saw in the conference app isn't limited to conferences. It's stuff that you could use in any app. The browsing of images and all the sort of use of OAuth and things like that are applicable in many other spaces. So again, talk to us if you want to find out more about those things. One last note that we might want to think about for the next webinar is we probably ought to think about some questions in advance as well, because once we'll be doing this on a quarterly basis, and we want to answer as many questions as possible. If you give us questions in advance, we could actually prepare some answers for them as part of the webinar, which I think would be pretty cool. So that's we'll put out a call for questions, and we'll spend a fair chunk of the webinar actually answering them. A couple more coming through about a more clear approach on internationalisation. That's probably something we need to get back to you offline about. We're apparently running out of time a bit here at the moment, and okay, and a couple of thanks coming through. So look, thanks everybody for participating in this. I hope it's been useful. It's been kind of fun for us as well, the first time we've done this, and we'll look forward to doing this again in another quarter. Bye.